Hey everybody, it's Nick. For today's tutorial, got a combination of things in Adobe Photoshop and Adobe InDesign just to create a simple PDF booklet for the assignment. This is going to be a quick introduction into both tools. I'm not going to cover a lot of the tools and a lot of the concepts. I'm going to try to keep it simple because a lot of this is new to people and there's still a lot to cover. So I'm not going to cover everything. We're gonna go through the semester and we're gonna learn more about these and kind of backfill some of the concepts. But again, for now, this is just going to focus on what we need for the assignment. So I actually am going to go ahead and start an InDesign and kind of get that going. So InDesign is a publishing tool. The idea of InDesign is that you are going to be making a document, and then it could be a little booklet, like a portfolio, or some kind of PDF presentation. But it works best when you have something that's got like multiple pages. You can also do layouts and things with it, but it's not as powerful when you're using it in that capacity. Um, what it does really well though is that it allows you to be consistent with things. So every page is laid out the same. You know, you making sure that using the same fonts. If you make a change to an image in a layout, then it automatically updates. It's a very smart, tool, right? And the idea of that is that it saves you time. I've seen too many students in the past, they're making portfolios or they're making books or and they'll make them all in Photoshop or they'll make all the pages in like Adobe Illustrator or something because they look a lot like InDesign and a lot of the functions are kind of similar. But the problem is that they're not smart. Like when you make a change to something, if it's in Illustrator or if it's in Photoshop, that's it. If you make a change later, you have to go back to the document and change it yourself and make sure that you change every page that is affected by that. If you decide to change the font, for example, you have to change every single page. If you change the font in the system that you build in InDesign, it automatically changes all the pages. And that's why we use things computationally. Like that's what's powerful about using computers. And so you got to make sure you use the right tool for the job. And in this case, we're only making a 5-page document, so we're not really using like that really powerful ability of it, but it's still a good habit to get into, like to make sure that you're doing that. So, okay, so we're gonna get started here. You can go up to File, New, Document, and the document thing. There's kind of a wizard that pops up that kind of asks us like what we want. And in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just have it be a bunch of vertical pages for now. And we're gonna assume that it's actually gonna be something um, that's gonna be like printed, even though it's gonna be on our screen for now. Like let's assume you're gonna give it to somebody, right? So you can go to print. I always go to inches because I can't understand things. Let's just do letter size. Go back to inches here. Here we go. So 8.5 by 11 is pretty standard thing. We're not gonna do phasing pages. We're just gonna do individual pages, and we're gonna do 5 pages. Okay. So 8.5 by 11 inches. We're not going to mess with any of the stuff there. Let's take a preview. Yeah, so that's kind of what we want. Okay, so and then we'll call it ARC 230 Lab 1. Okay. So these are all the different sizes of things. In the U.S., like letter size is just the kind of paper that you used to printing out of your home printer. It's pretty standard. So we're going to focus on that for now. Always important to understand your audience. Like, what are you going to do with it? Who are you going to give it to? What are you trying to achieve? Okay. In this case, I'm telling you, right? But what I'm kind of doing here is we're going to make a PDF with the assumption that somebody is going to print it on a printer. Like you're going to send it to your folks or whatever to show them what you're doing in class, and they're going to print it at home. So it's going to be 5 pages, and they're going to be vertical, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead and start there. So we're going to go create, and that's our layout. And there's like it already comes with like a margin, and that's kind of what's safe to print. A lot of printers won't print edge to edge, especially people's cheap like home printers, and so that's what that is. And what that gives you is gives you the ability to snap to, oops, undo that there. It gives you the ability to snap to those edges like that, and that's fine. Okay. So the way that Adobe products work, if you haven't used them in the past, is they have a pretty basic set of tools that are pretty common. And the ones that you have to know off the bat or the zoom tool. So you know Z if you're using your keyboard, and then you click the mouse to zoom in. You hold Alt or Option to zoom out, and then Pan, which is the little mouse here. Pan is the oops, let me zoom in here. Pan is a space bar, space or the icon. Get into the habit though of don't use the icons all the time, especially for operations like panning and zooming and selecting, because you use those all the time. So what you want to do is have one hand on the keyboard, so you can quickly change to zoom, or pan. Zoom is Z again, right? And so you can quickly kind of move around your files. You're going to be doing that all the time, and it saves you a little bit of time every time you do it. But over the course of your like lifetime, it's going to save you a ton of time. So really get used to that discipline of using the keyboard and the mouse. And we'll talk about this with every program we use. It's one of the like biggest improvements you can make when you're doing your workflow as an architect. Okay, so remember the way InDesign works again is it wants to be smart. Like you want to go ahead and try to have a consistent layout, from page to page, and you want it to be something that is that you can just plug images into, right? And then it'll keep things mostly the same. And so one of the ways we do that is with this rectangle frame. And the frame tool is that you draw a rectangle on the screen, and that rectangle, right, is just a placeholder. It's a window that the computer uses uh, to place images that you have. And we'll look at that in a bit here. So what we're going to do though with that, so when you have that window made, you can see the data about it up here. It's 5.5 inches by 6.18 inches, What I want to do though is make that window the same aspect as the page. And so what I'm going to do just to kind of eyeball it is to go ahead and click and drag this to the page. Okay, so now, oops, and I can type it into, it should be 8.5 by 11. So let's do 8.5 by 11. That's the thing too is, everything is data, right? So this information about this, like you can do it with your eye and you can do it with snaps. You can also do it with numbers, and that's the most accurate way to do it. So make sure when you're in these programs that when you're taking advantage of like numerical transforms because they're the most accurate thing that you have. So that right there is the aspect of it. But of course, that fills the entire page. And so what we want to try to do is two different things. I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it for now. So rotating is you just grab the corner and it turns into a little arrow there. Okay. And you can kind of rotate. Now, that doesn't do us a whole lot of good because you can't really eyeball that too well. So if you hold down shift, you can constrain it. So shift rotate. So 45 degrees, 60 degrees. Sorry, 90 degrees. So we get the same aspect in that direction. And then what you can do is that I'm going to go ahead and kind of park it up here. If you're not getting snaps, go to View, Grids and Guides, and Snap to Guides. Okay, and Smart Guides. You can toggle those off and on. Okay, what I'm going to do is grab it from the corner, and see if you grab it from the corner, I'm transforming it in two axes at the same time. Well, I want to make it smaller without changing the X and the Y scale. That's not what I want. So if I hold Shift though, again, it's going to let me constrain that. Okay, so practice that. So I'm going to hold Shift just like I did when I rotated it. If I hold Shift, I'm constraining it. And constrain just means limit, right? I think you guys all know that. But, so I can kind of pop that right there. And that's what I want. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Okay. The other thing that I kind of want to do is I don't want it to be so high up on the top of the page. I want there to probably be like an inch kind of gutter at the top. So what I can do is I can throw a guide down. So a guide in these programs, in these Adobe programs, usually you can just click and drag out of the ruler and it generates a guide for you. And you can click on that and you can change that guide. I want that to be 1 inch. So I'm going to have a 1 inch margin. And then that way I can just pop this thing and it's just going to stick to that 1 inch. Okay. Then I want to put some text underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop another guide like here. You can see that If you miss one, you can just go ahead and click back on it again. So that's a 6.8 inches. I want an inch below that, so I'm just going to call it 7.8. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and put a text box in there. Text box works the same as this box up here. I'm going to click and drag something, and that's going to give me an envelope that I can put text into. And um, the it's going to be consistent depending on what I said here. So whatever font I put in here, I'm just going to put in Arial, regular. That's a pretty standard font, and I'm going to make sure that. And if you lose that, just go ahead and double click inside the text box, and then I'm going to make it centered. And I'm going to make it probably like 18 point. Let's go ahead and just test it and make it bigger. Let's see here. That's fine. We're just doing something pretty generic for now. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. Resize that text box. That's pretty good. Okay, I check the settings here. So it's centered, Arial, 30 point. And then I'm going to go ahead and snap. So you can see as you move things around, these are what are called smart guides. So as I move, you see that purple or green in this case. That means it's centered on this element here. And so if I type text in, I'd say this is centered. I'm going to go ahead and actually change that font size because I think you guys are probably going to write more than I do. This is where you're going to put your captions for your images. I'm going to drop that down to 18. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of that text. Okay, so we're going to consider this like your template for the other pages that you have. And if you did this in InDesign, you would actually make this one of the like master pages, but I'm not going to get into that right now because this is already kind of getting to be a long video. So what I'm going to do is I realize I started this with 5 pages. I'm going to go ahead and click on these. So another thing to help you out with the computer when you're using a lot of software is how to select multiple things. To do that, a lot of times you're going to click on one thing and then hold Shift and then select everything. So try that. Click something, Shift, click the last one, and that's going to let you select all those. I'm going to go ahead and delete those with the little trash can here. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this thing. Another thing that's really useful a lot of times if you want to duplicate a lot of things and there isn't a built-in function is to make copies of the copies. So you click a couple things, right? We did that shift click to add to the selection. Is to right click both of those now and say duplicate. Now I got 4. That's much faster than duplicating it like 3 times. And I'm just going to duplicate like 1 more. The other thing you could do, if it like works for you, right, is I'll just show you this. Let's say I want 5. I can double these and then just delete the last one. Okay. Sometimes it's faster to just make more than you need and delete the end of it than it is to do that. Okay. Over time, you'll kind of pick up those things, but this is what it means, when I want you guys to work computationally. I'm going to be talking about this a lot in class, is you're taking advantage of the computer. Like the way the computer works, that's not the way that things like work in reality, right? And the computer, what's really powerful about it is that copies are free, right? Like it takes nothing to copy paste something at all. And that's like amazing, right? It's yeah. So anyway, so what we've got is we've got all these things laid out, and what we're going to do is we're going to put pictures inside of them, okay? But at this point, we're not gonna mess with that right now. We're gonna take a look at the pictures we have, and I'm gonna talk about why we need to Photoshop them a little bit. So if you need to take a break, now's a good time. All right, we're back. I'm going back to Photoshop. A lot of you guys have used Photoshop before, or at least you've been around it. You understand Photoshop is this tool that people use to edit images, right? And there's like a verb like to Photoshop something, right? Which either means to like fake something, like put aliens and things or make things that aren't real, or to fix something, right? Like if you had a photograph of a supermodel or something and you wanted to fix something that was wrong with his face or something like that, right? Then you would use Photoshop to make it look better. Um, but a lot of times in architecture, what we're doing is we're making combinations of images like photo collages, or we are making the images more dramatic or like stylized, right? And so that's the kind of image editing that we do pretty frequently. We're using images to make new images. So these are a couple images that I got online from just different images of Iowa State University. They're not mine, but there's two different images. So I have one image that's from Cameron of the king, and I have this other image that I got from I think the Alumni Foundation or something that's of the Campanile. And you can see like this image is 67% of the actual size, and this is 50%. You can see like this image has more information. It's a bigger image. It's a better quality photo. This is a still a good photo, but it has less information in it, right? And what I mean by that is if you go to image size, you can see the number of pixels in the image. More pixels is more information, right? Um, Images are made out of pixels. The sum total of those are called a bitmap, and it's like literally a map of the color information. If I zoom in on the grid, if I keep zooming in here, you can see that it's just a bunch of squares, and you can see that each square has a color. And if I use the eyedropper tool with eye here, click on that and double click the color, you can see the information in that color. You can see the red, green, blue color values for each pixel, and that's the information in the image. And a lower resolution image, like you can see if I zoom out, remember how to zoom out? Hold the Alt key and click. You can see how it's kind of like you see the sky, and then you see the edge of it is kind of made up of kind of like a sort of like a feathering of those pixels here. When you zoom out, it's like a little bit. You can kind of see here a little bit less apparent. If I got a higher resolution image of something, I know it actually shows up already, but you should see less of that because there's more information around things, or at least you can zoom in further before you start to see that information. Okay, and that's the idea. Like it's a better camera. It captures more pixels for what they are. Here, the computer is kind of estimating. It's kind of figuring out how to make the image with fewer pixels. Okay. And the reason why there's a couple reasons why this is important and why I'm talking about this now. So one, a lot of times there's a tendency to use really large images. Like a lot of cameras are set to take a high resolution image. It looks really good when you print it, but it takes up a lot of memory. And the thing about this is that you've always got to think about your audience, like I said before. And if this is going to be a PDF that you need to send to people, which you frequently do, right? Because we're trying to communicate, you can't keep sending people like 100 megabyte, PDFs. PDF needs to be something you can email or something you can pass around quickly, and so they need to be less than 20 megabytes or somewhere around there for most documents, right? If it was really for production or something really high quality, of course you could go higher, but most email systems won't allow you to send files that are very large, and so it's a good habit to get into is to know how to make these things high quality or good quality, but to make them efficient, to make them smaller. What you don't want to do is take your InDesign file and then just like throw in the full resolution image and then try to like send that to somebody or to try to like plot that to somebody, plot that for somebody. It will work, I will say, but it's probably going to be really slow, and it may cause you other headaches. And so I just want you guys to know how to look at that now. So what I'm going to do is a couple different things. So one, you can look at the image that you've got. And you can see this information. A couple of things. Like one, first of all, this one's vertical, and we've been looking at this thing as kind of a horizontal aspect, right? Um, Two, we want to look at that file size. So the resolution for this right now is 300 pixels per inch, and that is a lot of people use that for printing, but that's actually still pretty high. You don't necessarily need that for most prints, especially if you're only going to print 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17, which are really inexpensive prints and really common. For those kinds of things, you probably only need like 200 pixels per inch or whatever. And you can see as I change that, the computer is actually changing the size of the image. Um, The resampling means that the computer is either trying to add more detail or lose detail from an image computationally. And that's because simply, if we make an image smaller, we got to get rid of some pixels. So the computer's got to figure out which ones to keep, which ones to get rid of, and how to make it look as close to the original image as possible. And so it's going to do some math, it's going to change some colors. And the same thing is true when you make an image bigger, right? You are not going to, there isn't any information about what it looks like when it's bigger, so the computer has to interpolate it. It's going to maybe increase the area of a color, or it's going to try to fill in some detail because it doesn't know exactly what's going to go there when it gets bigger. So there's all these different kinds of resampling algorithms, and a lot of times automatic is fine, but you can say like, if you're going to enlarge an image, these are different algorithms that it can use to try to make the image better. If you're going to reduce an image, this one sharpens it, right? Because as you reduce it, you don't want it to get like blurrier, right? And so that's really what this is all about. I'm going to kind of demonstrate that for you. So let's just say I'm going to shrink this image down to something really small, like 200. So you look at it right now, it looks okay, right? But if I zoom in, you can see there's a lot less information in it, right? It's kind of like blurry. I've lost I've lost that information, right? But it is pretty sharp. If I go back and I try to increase the size, of the image to something that looks pretty good, right? But as I kind of zoom in, you can still kind of see like it's not increasing that detail. Like I'm still not making out that chain like much better than I was before, right? You can always reduce an image, like because it's easier to take information out, right? If you have an image that started off like really small, for example, so if I do this, if I make this thing, you know, 200 something, whatever, and then I try to make it like bigger, go back to like 2000 or something. Well, I'm not, you can see it did the best job it could, but that information's not there. So it's just going to be kind of a mess. Okay. So it's a good idea to make your images as big as you can. Like take good photos, make good renderings, scan your things at a high resolution. But like when it comes to actually editing them, you want to try to make something small. If you started with it small, you don't have a lot of room to go. Like you can make it smaller, but you can't make it bigger. Okay. So anyway, I hope that's just kind of an explanation of all those different things. But in this case, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to revert this thing. So revert just takes us back. Okay. We're going to use the image size tool. So this is, again, really useful tool because it's a way to change the size of things. We're going to be looking at, in this case, like a couple different things. Right now, like high def, HD, you guys have heard of probably 1080p, that's kind of the standard format for things. That's considered high definition. If you look at, you can read about it on Wikipedia, right? It's not, I mean, I know there's 4K and I know there's 8K and all these things like that, but like realistically, we're not really seeing that in monitors, and visually it doesn't make a whole lot of difference at the distance that we're going to be viewing things, and it just makes things ridiculously huge. And so at this point in time in this class, I'm going to look at this and just say, let's pretend like we're looking at things in like high def, and that's the resolution we're going to use. So it's 1920 pixels horizontally, across by 1080 pixels vertically. Okay. AV people, you can argue with me or whatever, but this is what I'm gonna say. So 1920 by 1080, and this is in the notes here. And so what you can do to kind of help yourself out here, and like I said before, I'm gonna go ahead and do. You can either do 72. I might just do 100 pixels per inch to give us a little bit of headroom. And then you want to look at like the width and the height dimensions of the image. Obviously, it's taller than it is wide, and so I might try to go and say 1920, and just kind of see what that looks like. Okay, so that's what we have here. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to give us something that is as close to the high def aspect and the number of pixels as we can get. We're going to resample it. I think it's an enlargement, so you can try to say preserve details if you want. It's fine. Okay, so that gives us their image in high def. The issue with it is that it's not going to crop, because remember, this is the aspect we have. Okay, and in fact, the aspect we have is actually horizontal right now. Okay, we'll have to fix that. What you can do though is you can look at that. If you go to the crop tool, you can go in and say, okay, I'm going to look at that image. Don't worry about the PPI thing right now, but if you look at this thing at that resolution and you look at it as 8.5 by 11, you can actually see that we're going to lose. This is the crop, the like crop window here. Okay, you can actually see that we'll lose a little bit of the image, right? If you look at, I'll stop this here. If you look at the image size, um, look back here. So 1080 versus 14, we're going to lose like 300 pixels when we actually crop the image to fit that container, right? Because remember, this container that we made is actually, it's the same aspect as the paper, okay? And I'm gonna make a duplicate here again and modify it. So when you want to make something, you want to try to make it based on a copy if it's part of a set, right? So instead of remaking everything, I'm going to make a duplicate, and then I'm going to go ahead and rotate that. So remember, so how do we rotate something again so that it stays in 45 and 90 degrees? Think about that. Hold Shift. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we can now we can do two things. If you like that situation, you can go ahead and put the picture here, and then let's go ahead and modify this. So we're gonna go ahead and snap this here, and then 1 inch below that. So it's pretty close to 9 inches. I'm gonna go ahead and sorry, pretty close to 8. I'm gonna go ahead and add 9, and then put my caption under there. Did I do that here? Yeah. So let's take a look at these. So you can, to move a page, just click and drag it. You can move it before or after one. So here's what the first page looks like, and here's what a vertical page looks like. So I think that's pretty good. The other thing you could do if you wanted, and I think it might look awkward, is you could take that aspect, if you really want to try to fill the page, you could take this thing and again drag it. Actually, that's not going to work too well. Okay, undo that. Okay, so to undo, we want to do Control Z. I think you guys probably know that, but I just want to confirm that you guys know that. Yeah. So now we've got a template that works for a a horizontal page and a vertical page. So that's pretty cool. And we don't have to crop these in Photoshop. I will show you how you can do that in InDesign, but I think it helps. So I'm going to go ahead and split the difference here, and I've got the crop tool, and I've got this turned on, and then to crop something, you just check the box, and now it's cropped. Okay. Let's see what that looks like here. So now I got my image. I'm going to go ahead and save it, and I'm going to save it as a one cropped, because I remember I've changed the resolution. I made it a little bit bigger, but I also like that may add some information that makes it look better, and I've cropped it already. So now I'm guaranteed to know that it's going to look okay when I put it in that container. Like I'm in control of it. Okay. Some of your images, depending on your camera, like cropping it might not make it like look better. You might have to really make some decisions about maybe a different image, or maybe be really careful about how you actually crop it. That's something that you're going to have to experiment with or ask us about. But this image works okay. So I'm going to go. I've got that image saved. To put the image into your document, what you want to do is you click on the window on the template here, and then you're going to say place. And if I go into my directory here, so I got my cropped image, that just pops in. Oh, I don't know why it's upside down. Maybe my container is upside down. Okay, I think my container. Well, that's easy to do. So I'm just gonna flip that container upside down. That's really strange. Okay. Now you can see though it doesn't quite seem like it fits that well. That's because the container is a certain size on the page, and the image hasn't been adjusted yet. Remember this thing is just a container, the thing you put the image into. Um, it is it's linked to the file through the place command. So what that means is that like the image is actually not in the document, it's a connection to it. If I go back, and this is what's really cool about it, if I go back and change this thing, I save it, and I go back and I hang on a minute here. There we go. And you just have to relink it. It's going to change it. That's what's powerful about InDesign. That change happens automatically. I had a little glitch on my computer there, but we don't want to do that though. So if I go back, undo that, save it. Let's see here. Yeah, there. Just click the link there. Okay, and then it updated. Okay, so that's what's cool about it is that if you make a change, or if someone on your team makes a change, it's going to update it. You don't have to ask someone to go in and update the document. It happens automatically. That's what's really cool about InDesign. That's where you're using computation. So we're going to go in, and so it's not scaled yet though. So what I'm going to do is, so two things. One, to quickly fix it, just right click it and just go fit, and then you're going to say fill frame, and then that'll make it fit the frame. Okay. If you didn't do that, the other thing is, remember this is a window. So when you double click it, so when you just move it, you're just moving the, oops, hang on a second here. I'm not doing this. Oh, I'm using this wrong selection here. I gotta use the regular selection. Yeah. So when you move this right now, you're moving the the box, like the container. If you double click inside of it, see how it turns brown? Now you're moving the image inside the window. Okay. And that allows you to do different things. That allows you to crop it actually because you say, well, I have this much space on my page. I'm going to move that image around to get to some kind of detail or whatever that I want. And that's handy. You can also go in and so to get out of it, you double click. So if I'm in the brown thing, now I'm moving the image. If I double click, now I'm moving the box. Okay. If you click on, if you move the box, you can actually crop with the container, which is also really powerful. Okay. Um, and so that's how those two things work together. So there's the container, and then there's the image, and you can rescale the image inside the container like you just did before. But and you can experiment with the fill content, that kind of thing. But you can just say fill frame, and that's going to fill that in. And since we already cropped it to the aspect ratio of this thing, it's going to fit great. It's going to look nice. Okay. If we had another vertical image, we could go ahead and duplicate that spread again and just double click the container. Make sure it turns brown and then just delete the image if you needed that. Okay. So now we've got something that works pretty well. So let's go in and go ahead and edit the other image. So if I go to my big Iowa State image, I'm going to go ahead and clean it up again. So once again, I'm looking at the aspect ratio, and right now it's too big. So I would, what you can do is, remember it's 1920. You can look at that ratio, and that gives me room to crop the height. If you do 1080, it's not going to be tall enough in this ratio. You can do that if you want to. Like, I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to go ahead and resample it. I'm actually going to do 100 resolution and then 1920. So you can see that it's, yeah, let's see here. That's actually not what I wanted. 1080. That's what I want to show you. So we don't have enough pixels here. If we want 1920, We just don't have enough pixels. It's just going to be empty there. Okay, you can do that if you want to. So I'll show you the two examples. So here, I've rescaled it. Don't save over your thing. Make a copy of it because you want to be able to go back and fix it later if you made a mistake. Okay, so now I'm going to go in, go to my page, click on the box, go place, and I'm going to place that cropped image. That thing is messed up too. I guess rotating it is not too happy. Okay. What you can do too is I didn't talk about this, but if you're so I double click the container. I can also just go in and type in what I want. Oops. Really. Let's go ahead. Okay. I rotated it out. Let's go to fill frame. Okay. There we go. So you can rotate it here. Okay, so you can see though, because I didn't crop it, before, I'm losing a little bit in the width, like a little bit it doesn't fit in the width. So you could crop it in Photoshop and kind of see what it looks like. You can also kind of crop it here. So if I double click, or if I'm not in there, if I double click it, I can use the arrow keys to kind of nudge it, and you can see like I've still got some room here. Like that's the border of the image, so I can kind of move it in there, and I kind of like that. It's up to you. But what you don't want though is the extra. You don't want the white space. Like don't go over the edge so that it doesn't fill in. I would always overlap it a little bit. You never know when you're going to be off a pixel and then it kind of looks bad. So that's not too bad. The other thing that I could do is so I go back to my image here. I'm going to go back to the original image. And I'm going to go into image size again, go to 100 pixels. And I said, what happens if I do, let's see, 1920 here. And then the height, I've got extra pixels here in the height. So before I didn't have enough pixels, now I have too many pixels. Okay. Save as, let's say, big 2 cropped alt. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place that. So click on the thing, go to place. Oops. No, I don't want to place it from the libraries. Okay. Okay, there we go. So again, let's fix it. So I double click it to get into it, and then let's go back to 0 degrees, and let's say fit proportionally. If I don't rotate it first, it's going to fill it rotated, and I don't like that. This is not quite. Oh, you know what? Because I filled it proportionally, that's let's see. Let's try it this way. Fit content. Yeah. Sorry. So if you go fill frame, it's going to actually do a lot of cropping for you. What I wanted to do is actually fit content. So here it's gonna privilege the aspect and the size of the image. And you can see what that does though is that has left a gap in the container. Now I'm of two minds about this. Let's actually go ahead and copy this whole layout here so you can kind of see what we're doing here. Okay. It depends on what you want and what your audience wants. Like on one hand, if I got a book of these things, it might be nice that this thing it always has an image in the same place on every page. On the other hand, like maybe I took this picture and I composed it a certain way because I want you to look at this image. I don't want to crop it. There's a difference, right, between this image, right, and this image. So on one hand, you're privileging the layout, right, where you're saying, I'm going to fill this box, like every page. This box is going to be filled. To be filled, when you scroll through, there's always an image filling this in the same position. On the other hand, you might want to privilege the image and you say, oh, I want to look at these things as images that do fill, this side of the page, but I want to keep the image the way that it was shot. I like the composition of it. Remember, the text is going to still be in the same place, on every page or whatever. So there's a consistency there, right? But you see the difference. Okay. So again, this was the content proportion, and this was the frame proportion. So It's up to you. But I would be consistent. I would say that like, if you're always gonna like privilege the images, then make sure that you're always, keeping the horizontal at least, and then maybe you're leaving out some information like vertically, at least when it comes to these kinds of images, right? Otherwise, you are always going to fill that thing, and you're just going to have to crop it intelligently so that you don't lose things. So to recap though, like you can crop the images here, before you place them. And if you have this control here and crop, you can go ahead and just flip that. So now that's what that looks like. And see, I can kind of do the same thing that I was doing in InDesign, only I can do it, before the image kind of gets there. It's your call. They both work. This, though, is changing the image, right? You have now taken the image and actually cut it out, and when you save it, that's cut. In this instance, see, the image is all still there. It's actually hidden behind the window. So it's a little bit bigger image, maybe gives you some flexibility, like in the layout. It's your call. There's many different ways to do things. I'm gonna go ahead though. I do like the way that this looks, I have to say. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make that the way that I mean the image container is still there. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete that layout. Okay. And so there's my image. Here's my vertical copy. Here's another one. And so like, you go into Photoshop, your process is go ahead and open up an image. I'm gonna go ahead and find maybe another vertical image and check on that, image size again. So here again, this is a pretty small image. This might not be a big enough image. Okay, when we put it in the book. I don't have a lot of information that's even at 150 pixels per inch. We're really we're really running out of space. I mean, we're running out of information. So let's try 1820 and see that's also going to be. So you can try it both ways. I mean, oftentimes I go for the longer dimension, and I'll go ahead and put in like your like the larger resolution, so the 1920, and then you can crop out the other one. You just have to see. Otherwise, try 1080 in the smaller dimension, and then see what you're gonna have to crop, or what gets cropped automatically. It's your call. That's how the two methods work. So in this case, like this image is shot this way, so I'm gonna do that. So here's what I've got. Little fuzzy, if you can see. Like I'm not sure like that. If that were the case, I would either take the image again, if you have the ability to, or use a different image or something, because what you want your document to be consistent too. You don't want a bunch of nice images, right? And then you go through and let's go save as I don't know, cropped, and place it in there. Yeah, and let's do fitting. Let's fit content. So there you go. You can see it's a little fuzzier, than the other. The other thing I will say too about this is that the image that you see here is not necessarily exactly what you're going to get. A lot of times the computer is kind of putting up a draft quality image so that it can process faster. You will not actually know what it looks like until you see the final output. Okay, so don't trust this. Like you need to check your size and make sure that all works. So I'm gonna go ahead and quickly kind of get through this so we can get this out and get you guys on your way. So again, if you can have a combination of different things in your document. They don't all have to be horizontal. They don't all have to be vertical, right? You should just notice too that this is actually, shoot, my template's a little bit off. This is also why we use master pages. So I really want this thing to be a 1 inch. I want it to be consistent. So that is, these are not. So I'm going to go ahead and it's really easy to just hold shift. If you hold shift, it constrains the direction that you're moving things. And in this case, I just want to move it down I don't want to move it side to side or whatever. And so if I hold shift as I move it, you can see that it locks it so that it only moves up or down or only moves it left and right. And that's, I'm going to lock it to that right there. It's a good idea. Make sure you get this right before you do that. Okay, that's better. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these for now. And let's just pretend like this is a 5-page document at this point. Okay. So I got my things. I got my labels that you guys are gonna put in. Try to keep the labels pretty small. Okay, so everything's ready. Go ahead and save your file. Make sure you're saving as you go. I would actually probably save things every time you make a big change, every time you add a page, I'd go ahead and save it. Another thing to do too is to save a copy of it or save as. Just say like 2, right? Because sometimes you'll make a change and you want to go back. If you're always using the same file for everything, like every time you make a change, you're just saving the same file. What happens if you want to go back? A lot of times you can't. You've already overwritten that file and there's no restoring it. The exception to that is if you're using something like Dropbox. And I don't know if you guys use Dropbox, but it will actually save multiple copies in the cloud, and you can restore something if you need to. But I would not depend on that because it doesn't always work, and it's a pain to actually use. I would just go ahead and save a copy of the file as you go. So, and it could be something like every big change, every half an hour, every time you take a coffee break, whatever. But don't just like work out of one file like all the time for the assignment because it's going to get you in trouble later. Okay, so we saved our file. We're actually ready to output. So there's 2 things that I want you to do. One, you can just go export and then you can just make a PDF. You say save. And the options here are pretty good by default. And you just want to keep everything the way that it is. And just going to go ahead and say export. And it's going to crunch. And then boom, there's your PDF. Okay. Something I gotta be careful with this edge here. I needed to crop that out or something. I don't know. I think it's in the file. So get rid of stuff like that if you've got that in there. But these are your images. They're laid out. You can see though, like see how consistent that border is at the top. That's real nice. Okay. I might move the text up a 1/2 inch. I think that's probably better. I'm gonna move this up a 1/2 inch. So let's see, let's do some math, 7.3. Always a good idea though, like I said. So you notice though that the quality was actually, looked a little bit better in the output. Even that one actually is not as bad as I thought it was. It starts to get kind of fuzzy as you zoom in though. You can definitely tell that that's a lower quality image. So try to be consistent. Okay, so there is your output, and that's probably good enough. But what I would say is this too. Okay, so that's what you're gonna output for the assignment. You're gonna upload that PDF once everything is good, right? You got labels for everything. You've got your 5 images. The layout's consistent. You think you're done, but I would say this too. When you are done with a project, especially when you want to like archive it or you want to give it to somebody else to work on, or you think you're going to work on it later, don't just save the InDesign file. What you want to do is do a package. Okay, a package is a special kind of file that contains all the images, all the fonts, all the stuff that you're using. Okay, so you just hit package, and yeah, it'll save it. That's fine. And then give it a folder on the desktop, and it'll say package. Okay, and then it's going to make the whole thing. The package. Let's go to my desktop here. The package file. It looks like this. So you're going to have it's a folder. It contains the PDF that it generates. It's going to contain the InDesign document. It's got the markup, which is additional data for the document. It's going to have all the fonts that you used. So it has Arial, and it has all of the images that you used already in the file. And so this is super convenient because like here are all the things that you like worked on. If you give it to somebody, they can open up this InDesign file if they have InDesign, and it doesn't matter if they don't have the fonts that you have. It doesn't matter, if they don't have links. If they don't have access to the images, it's all packaged. A lot of times what you would do with this thing is just take it and like zip it up, just like zip it and give it to somebody, and that's the entire project in like one file. The reason for this is A, that's really convenient to have it all in one place, and it's convenient to get to somebody you're working with so that they can make the edits to the file. The other thing is that remember that these images are not in the file; they're linked to the file. Okay. If you don't package things and you change the location of the files that you had, or you change or you like delete the files or like whatever, you're going to open this thing up and these are going to be empty, or it's going to throw some kind of warning at you. Okay. If you package them and you work from the package, it's going to know where those things are. Okay. And that's what's really powerful about it. If you happen to lose that image, what you can do though is, but if you have the images, you can go to links, and I'm just going to drag this out here, and you can click on and you can say relink, and then you can put the file back in there. And it's also handy later. You're not going to do this, but you can change the image. Like let's say you replaced it with a totally different image, you can go to a different image, and it'll change the image. Okay. So again, if you right click the image, if you go to the image, open up the links tab. If you don't have it, just go to links, right? You can go to the image. You can see that that's linked right there. And then you can actually relink it or change the image. So that's what's super powerful about that. Okay. So if you didn't listen to me and then you open the file later and it says your links are broken, you're going to get a little yellow kind of thing here that tells you where the broken links are. That's how you relink it. But that's not going to happen to you because you packaged it. Okay. So finish the assignment, go ahead and like output your PDF, check it. That's the other thing too is, when you look at your PDF, make sure you don't have, if you have any extra pages, go ahead and go to thumbnails and just delete the page. You can just do that. Save it. Um, check the file size of it. So if you have it, two ways to do that. You can go to view and go to details. You'll see the file size. That one's great. That's like 2 megabits. No problem. Right click it. You can go to properties and you can also check the file size, 1.84 megabytes. Okay. That's what you want. It needs to be less than 20. What happens if it's more than 20? Well, it shouldn't be, because if you've rescaled all the images to high def, 5 pages should not be that big. Probably like 5 megabits or something like that. If your thing is too big, and you're not doing this assignment over, you can do two things. You can rescale the images and relink them, and then output and see if that makes a difference. Remember, like depending on how you're outputting it, you don't need like 5K, 8K images. It's just overkill. There's no reason for that. Even on those big monitors at school. Uh, if you do run into that problem though with the PDF you've already generated, let's say, you can try the following. You can open it up and you can go to File. Let's see here, Files, Save As. And this might be a little bit Save As Other. And you can try a reduced size PDF. And what this does, go ahead and just leave it at 10 or whatever it is. Let's try reduced. And you can see it's resampling all the images. You can also try, save as other. You can also go and do optimize PDF. And this one, so reduced size just automatically tries to make the size smaller. PDF optimizer gives you a lot of fine control over the images. And so you can say like, well, if I have images, I'm going to go ahead and downsample them to like 72 dpi, for example, for any images above, whatever, 108. That won't actually do anything because our images are actually like 100 dpi. So I'm going to say 72 dpi for images over 72 dpi. Let's see if that allows me to do that. Yeah, and we're going to say optimized. crunch. Okay, and you won't see the difference in the window. Like it's not gonna. You got to reopen it. So let's take a look at those things. Um, so the base file is 2 megabits. The reduced file is 400K, and the optimized file is 100K. So that's a huge reduction. Okay, but let's not celebrate just yet. So you can, if you want to dock something, a lot of times you can take a thing of Windows and just kind of put it to the edge and it'll pop up. You can also use the Windows key with an arrow. So like left arrow, right arrow, top arrow, bottom arrow, just so you know. Okay, and let's go to the reduced one. Same diff. Okay, so let's see. Let's compare apples to apples here. Yeah. So like, if you're looking at it, I don't really notice like a whole lot of difference here. Let's make them 100% maybe. Gotta keep the thing exactly the same. It's weird that the actual, yeah. So there you go. I mean, maybe not any difference at all. So that's pretty good. If you can live with that. I do notice it. Not so much. I was gonna say I feel like I notice it in the Campanile at the top here. Yeah, so there, and you can kind of see if that bothers you. You can see, especially the brickwork. You can see like the edge here, right? The clouds are less defined, so there's a cost, right? You're losing information by like rescaling it. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at that optimized one too. Take a look at it with the full resolution one. Oh wait, that's reduced. Optimized, reduced. There's the regular one. Okay, so if we go, yeah, so you can really tell. Look at you lose the detail in the trees. Clock looks terrible. Yeah, so there's a price, right? Your professor's probably not, or your client's probably not going to like that, especially if you have like a really nice drawing or something like that. So just, I think it pays to try to optimize the image and not to rely a lot on the Photoshop. I'm sorry, on the Adobe PDF optimizer. But that's pretty much what the difference is. You can really tell. The text is always going to be perfect because it's vector, and we'll talk about that later. That's never going to be a problem. Okay, so if you're in a pinch and you got to get stuff, that like reduced size works pretty well. It's probably like acceptable, especially for like a draft of something. You're trying to get out. It's not bad. It's not that bad until you zoom in. Like, let's be honest. Okay. The optimized one, depending on the settings, and I knocked it down quite a bit. That doesn't even look great just when you're looking through it. But it is a very small file. Okay. So that was a lot of stuff. That was a little whirlwind there. So make sure you take some notes, but the idea again is to have a consistent, layout for your images. Make sure that they're cropped well, but that you don't lose, any important information. Excuse me. You can make slight edits in Photoshop if it helps. I won't go into this too much, but like, really, really easy things that you can do for an image if it helps is to do something like go into levels. And, the level lets you kind of make the darks like darker, lets you make the bright. It's a way of adjusting the contrast like intelligently. If you find that you need a little bit of a pick me up for an image, like you could try adjusting the levels. You could also try adjusting the brightness and the contrast to get things a little bit more drama if you like. What you don't want to do is make it not realistic. You don't want to make it too stylized. Like it's just a touch up. Okay. I don't want you guys to edit the files like too much. They need to really be the images of the building. The other thing that might happen is depending on your uh, thing is that you might need. So a lot of times, if your images are too warm, you might need to Well, and this one's kind of too cool, but you might need to add a little bit of, of warmth to it. That's kind of like what this does. You can see that that takes it out. You want things that are white to be white. You don't want them to be orange or red, and you don't want them to be like blue a lot of the time. Okay. And so that might be something too, depending on your camera settings. Like if you took an image, a certain way, you might want to try to make it look a little bit more realistic again, instead of it being quite so warm or quite so cold. But right now I wouldn't mess with this all too much. But I just want to say that that option is there. And see, the image is kind of yellow blue. Maybe you don't like that. Okay. Um, Try to get to the true color. An image like this, because it's at night, like this blue is actually natural, but you can see like the lights are like white, and that's really what you want to be looking for in most cases. Okay. So if you want to do a little bit of image editing before you crop them, before you lay them out, that's okay. I didn't really cover that, but I think if you know what you're doing, that's acceptable, and you can experiment with that too. So there you go. Make your 5 pages, output your PDF, upload it, and that should be it. Okay. Let us know if you have any questions. I will talk to you guys later.